The distant wail of a train whistle pierced the crisp autumn air as Penelope Morrison stood at the edge of her property, clutching her father's worn leather journal to her chest, tears welling in her eyes as she surveyed the vast stretch of land that three strangers now claimed as their own. The year was 1887, and at 22 years old, Penelope found herself alone in Hillsborough, New Mexico Territory, fighting to keep the only home she had ever known after her father's sudden passing just 2 months prior. "Miss Morrison," Sheriff Taylor called from his horse as he approached. "I'm afraid there's not much I can do. Those men have papers too. Until a judge can sort this out, it's just your word against theirs." Penelope's fingers tightened around the journal. "But this was my father's land. He built everything here with his own hands." "I have the deed." "They have deeds too, Miss Morrison. 3 different claims, all saying they own this stretch. Something's not right, but I need more than your father's signature to stop them." As the sheriff tipped his hat and rode away, Penelope watched the 3 men who had appeared in town just days after her father's funeral. They stood near the property line, gesturing toward her modest ranch house and the fertile grazing land that stretched beyond. Jacob Whitman, a cattle baron from Texas with cold eyes and an even colder smile; Lester Davenport, a businessman from Santa Fe whose expensive suit couldn't hide his calculating nature; and Silas Thornton, a silver-tongued lawyer who claimed to represent Eastern investors. 3 vultures circling what remained of her life. "You can't stay here forever, Miss Morrison," Whitman called out, his voice carrying across the distance between them. "A woman alone can't manage a ranch this size. Be reasonable and take our offer." Their offer was pitiful a fraction of what the land was worth. Land that contained not just her home and livelihood, but also, unknown to most, had promising signs of silver deposits her father had discovered shortly before his death. Penelope turned away, refusing to let them see her tears. As she walked back toward the modest ranch house, she noticed a cloud of dust in the distance. A rider was approaching, moving at a steady pace along the trail that cut through her property. She paused, watching as the figure grew larger. The stranger rode a magnificent chestnut stallion that gleamed in the afternoon sun. He sat tall in the saddle, and even from a distance, there was something about his posture that commanded attention. As he drew nearer, Penelope could make out more details: a weathered Stetson pulled low over his brow, dusty trail clothes that had seen many miles, and a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt. When he reached the fence line, he slowed his horse and tipped his hat. "Afternoon, madam." "Name's Zachary Caldwell. I'm looking for the Morrison place." Something in his deep voice sent an unexpected flutter through Penelope's chest. "You found it. I'm Penelope Morrison." His eyes, a startling shade of blue against his sun-bronzed skin, widened slightly. "John Morrison's daughter." "Yes, did you know my father?" Zachary Caldwell dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his tall, lean frame. "I did. Worked alongside him years back, driving cattle north to Colorado." He glanced toward the 3 men watching them from the property line. "Seems you've got company." "They're not company," Penelope said bitterly. "They're trying to steal my land." Zachary's expression hardened as he looked from Penelope to the men and back. "Mind telling me what's happening here?" Penelope hesitated, studying the stranger's face. There was something in his eyes, a quiet integrity that reminded her of her father. Decision made, she nodded toward the house. "Would you care for some coffee, Mr. Caldwell? It's a long story." Inside the modest kitchen, Penelope poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs while explaining her situation. Her father had died suddenly of fever, leaving her the ranch they had worked together since her mother's death years earlier. Within days of his funeral, the 3 men had arrived, each with documents claiming ownership of different portions of her land. "This was my father's dream," she said, spreading a hand-drawn map across the table. "He came here when there was nothing but wild country, built everything you see. These men, they never set foot on this land until he was gone." Zachary studied the map, his fingers tracing the boundaries. "Your father was a good man, honest to his core. Something's not right here." He looked up, his gaze intense. "Do you have your deed?" Penelope retrieved a tin box from beneath a loose floorboard near the hearth. From it, she withdrew a folded parchment, yellowed with age. It's not fancy like their documents, but it's official, signed by the territorial governor himself back in '67. Zachary examined the deed carefully. This looks legitimate to me. Mind if I ask why you're alone here? No family to help, no one, Penelope sighed. My mother died when I was 12. No siblings. Father's brother died in the war. It's just me now. Zachary's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Morrison. Your father spoke of you often when we worked together. He was mighty proud of your spirit. A lump formed in Penelope's throat. Thank you for saying that. These men, Zachary continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. What exactly are their claims? Whitman says my father sold him grazing rights that somehow converted to ownership. Davenport claims he purchased the land from a previous owner before my father even arrived here. And Thornton has some documents saying the land was granted to his clients through a territorial dispute settlement. She laughed bitterly. 3 different stories, all of them lies. Zachary rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Mind if I take a look at their papers? They won't show them to me. Sheriff Taylor's seen them but says they look legitimate enough that he can't intervene without a judge's ruling. The circuit judge won't be through for months. By which time they hope to have run you off, Zachary finished. He stood, his tall frame seeming to fill the small kitchen. I came here looking for your father because I have information that might be valuable to him. Seems it might be even more valuable to you now. Penelope felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. What information? I need to confirm a few things first. With your permission, I'd like to stay on your property for a few days. I can help with chores while I'm here earning my keep. Penelope hesitated only briefly. Ranch work was overwhelming for one person, and having a strong back around would be a welcome relief. More than that, there was something about Zachary Caldwell that made her feel safer than she had since her father's death. There's a bunkhouse behind the barn, nothing fancy, but it's clean. You're welcome to stay there, Zachary nodded. Thank you, Miss Morrison. I'll start by having a word with your visitors. Before she could protest, he was striding out the door, his long legs carrying him quickly toward the 3 men who still lingered near the property line. Penelope watched from the porch as Zachary approached the men. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, she could see the stiffening of Whitman's shoulders, the nervous adjustment of Davenport's expensive collar, and the narrowing of Thornton's eyes. Whatever Zachary was saying, it wasn't what they wanted to hear. After several minutes, the 3 men mounted their horses and rode off, with Thornton turning to cast a dark glance back at the ranch house. Zachary watched them go before returning to where Penelope waited. What did you say to them? She asked. Just introduced myself. Let them know I'd be staying on as your ranch hand for a spell. His blue eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. Also mentioned I used to ride with the Texas Rangers and have a particular interest in land fraud cases. Were you really a ranger? A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. For 3 years. Before that, I scouted for the army. These days I do a bit of this and that, mostly helping folks who need it. Penelope felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Penelope woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of chopping wood. She dressed quickly and stepped onto the porch to find a neat stack of firewood beside the door and Zachary already at work, mending a broken section of fence. You didn't have to start so early, she called as she approached with 2 mugs of coffee. Zachary straightened, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool morning air. Early bird catches the worm, my pa always said. He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Besides, there's much to do. They worked side by side that day, falling into an easy rhythm. Zachary was skilled with horses and livestock, and his strong hands made quick work of repairs that had been neglected during her father's illness and after his death. More surprising to Penelope was how comfortable she felt in his presence. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and often laced with a dry humor that made her laugh, something she hadn't done in months. As the sun began to set, they returned to the house, both tired but satisfied with the day's progress. Over a simple dinner of beans, cornbread, and salt pork, Zachary finally spoke of his purpose. Your father wrote to me about 6 months ago, he said, placing a folded letter on the table between them. We'd kept in touch over the years. He mentioned he'd found something on his property that might attract unwanted attention, asked if I could come advise him. Penelope unfolded the letter, recognizing her father's neat handwriting. As she read, her hands began to tremble. "The silver vein, he told you about it," Zachary nodded. "Not directly in the letter, but we had a code from our driving days. He was concerned someone might intercept his mail." "He only showed me the vein a month before he fell ill," Penelope said quietly. "It's in the north section, hidden in a ravine. He made me swear not to tell anyone, for good reason. Silver can make men lose their minds, their morals too." Zachary leaned forward. "I think that's what's behind these sudden claims on your land. Someone found out. But how? Father was so careful, mining supply purchases, assay office visits, bank deposits. There are many ways information can leak." Zachary sipped his coffee. "Tomorrow I'd like to ride into town, ask some questions." "I'll come with you," Penelope said firmly. "It might be safer if this is my land, Mr. Caldwell, my fight." Her green eyes flashed with determination. "I won't hide while others decide my fate." Zachary studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Your father was right about your spirit, Miss Morrison." The next morning, they rode into Hillsborough together. The small mining town was bustling with activity, wagons delivering supplies, miners coming and going from the assay office, women shopping at the general store. Penelope felt the stares as she rode beside Zachary, knew the whispers that followed. A young woman alone was already the subject of gossip. A young woman with a handsome stranger beside her would set tongues wagging for weeks. Their first stop was the land office, where the clerk, a nervous man named Perkins, nearly dropped his spectacles when Zachary asked to see all records related to the Morrison property. "I am afraid those records are currently under review, sir," Perkins stammered. Zachary leaned against the counter, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that nevertheless carried steel beneath it. "Under whose authority?" Mr. Thornton has requested them on behalf of his clients. "And has Mr. Thornton presented any court order authorizing exclusive access to public records?" Perkins swallowed hard. "Well, no, but then we'd like to see them. Now." While Penelope admired Zachary's authoritative manner, it was his methodical examination of the records that truly impressed her. His fingers traced dates and signatures, his eyes narrowing at certain notations. After an hour of careful study, he asked to see records for adjacent properties and land transfers going back 20 years. By midday, they had moved on to the assay office, where the owner, Alistair Green, greeted Penelope warmly. "Miss Morrison, it's good to see you in town. Your father was sorely missed at our last chess match." His eyes flickered to Zachary with undisguised curiosity. "Mr. Green, this is Zachary Caldwell, an old friend of my father's. He's helping me with some ranch matters." Green's handshake was firm. "Any friend of John Morrison is welcome here. What can I do for you folks today?" Zachary's questions were subtle but probing about recent assays in the area, who might have been asking about minerals on Morrison land, whether anyone had brought in samples similar to what John might have discovered. Green's answers confirmed their suspicions. Shortly before John's death, Whitman had brought in rock samples that Green was certain came from Morrison land. Their final stop was Sheriff Taylor's office. The lawman was less than pleased to see them. "Miss Morrison, I told you there's nothing I can do until the judge arrives. Perhaps you could at least look at the information we've gathered," Zachary suggested, spreading several documents on the sheriff's desk. "These land office records show inconsistencies in the dates on Thornton's and Davenport's claims, and this bank record indicates Whitman transferred funds to both men 3 days after John Morrison's funeral." The sheriff's brow furrowed as he examined the papers. "This is interesting, but not proof of wrongdoing. What about this?" Zachary placed another document on the desk. "A telegram from Santa Fe confirming that the territorial governor's signature on Davenport's deed is a forgery." Sheriff Taylor's head snapped up. "Where did you get this?" "I have friends in government offices. Ask them to verify some details." The sheriff sat back, stroking his mustache thoughtfully. "This changes things. I can arrest Davenport for forgery, but Whitman and Thornton are still problems. We'll handle them," Zachary said confidently. As they left the sheriff's office, Penelope touched Zachary's arm. "Thank you for what you're doing. Most men wouldn't bother helping a woman they barely know." His eyes met hers, something warm flickering in their blue depths. "You're not just any woman, Miss Morrison. You're John's daughter. And you're fighting for what's right." A commotion down the street interrupted the moment. Jacob Whitman stood outside the saloon, his face flushed with anger as he shouted at Zachary. "Caldwell, what lies have you been spreading about me?" Zachary stepped slightly in front of Penelope. "No lies, Whitman, just facts. Like how you bribed Morrison's doctor to tell you about the silver vein when he was treating John's fever." Whitman's hand inched toward his holster. "You can't prove that." "The doctor's confession is already on its way to the territorial marshal's office," Zachary said calmly, "along with evidence of your conspiracy with Davenport and Thornton." People had stopped to watch, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Penelope's heart hammered in her chest as she saw the murderous rage in Whitman's eyes. "You're bluffing," Whitman snarled. "Am I?" Zachary hadn't moved, his posture relaxed despite the tension crackling in the air. "Sheriff's already arrested Davenport for forgery. Thornton's probably halfway to Mexico by now if he's smart." With a roar of fury, Whitman drew his pistol. Before it cleared his holster, Zachary's gun was already aimed at his chest. "Don't," Zachary said softly. Whitman froze, his eyes widening as he realized how badly he'd miscalculated. Sheriff Taylor emerged from his office, his own weapon drawn. "Drop it, Whitman. You're under arrest." As the sheriff led Whitman away, Zachary holstered his pistol and turned to Penelope. Her face was pale, but her eyes blazed with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Let's get you home," he said, guiding her toward their horses. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As they crested the final hill overlooking the Morrison property, Zachary reined his horse to a stop. Penelope did the same, following his gaze across the valley where her land stretched out before them, golden in the late afternoon light. "It's beautiful country," he said softly. "Your father chose well. He always said this was where he found peace after the war." Penelope studied Zachary's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the distant look in his eyes. "Do you ever find peace, Mr. Caldwell?" He turned to her, something vulnerable flickering across his features before he masked it with a slight smile. "Not often, not for long. Perhaps you're looking in the wrong places." Their eyes held for a long moment before Zachary looked away first. "Perhaps." Back at the ranch, they settled into a routine over the next few days. Zachary continued helping with repairs and ranch work, while Penelope cooked meals and tended to her garden. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking late into the night. He told her of his adventures tracking outlaws with the Rangers, scouting for the army during conflicts with native tribes, driving cattle through territories where law was just a distant concept. Penelope shared stories of growing up on the ranch, her father's patient teaching, her dreams of expanding the property someday. She found herself looking forward to these conversations, to the way Zachary listened as though her words mattered, to the rare smile that transformed his serious face. On the fourth night, as a full moon bathed the landscape in silver light, Penelope asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you really come here, Zachary? Was it just because of my father's letter?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "Your father saved my life once during a cattle drive. Flash flood caught us crossing a river. My horse went down, current took me. John jumped in after me." He rubbed absently at a scar on his forearm. "Most men wouldn't have risked it." "He did without hesitation." Penelope smiled softly. "That sounds like him. I promised myself I'd repay that debt someday." Zachary turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "When his letter came, I was working a job in Colorado, didn't get the message for months. By the time I got here, you were too late for him," Penelope finished. "But not for me." "Not for you," he agreed. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither was ready to name. Penelope rose abruptly, mumbling something about an early morning, and fled inside. her heart racing with emotions she hadn't expected to feel again, especially not for a drifter who would surely leave once his debt was repaid. The following afternoon, Sheriff Taylor rode out to the ranch, bringing news that Thornton had indeed fled, but had been apprehended at the territorial border. Davenport and Whitman were in custody, facing multiple charges. Most importantly, the sheriff brought official confirmation that Penelope's deed was legitimate and the only valid claim to the property. "Thanks in large part to your friend here," Sheriff Taylor said, nodding toward Zachary. His telegram to the territorial governor's office lit a fire under some important people. After the sheriff departed, Penelope turned to Zachary, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. You've saved everything that matters to me." Zachary shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. No thanks needed, just keeping a promise. Is that all it was? A promise to a dead man? Something flashed in his eyes, a hunger quickly suppressed. "It's what it had to be, Miss Morrison. I think after everything we've been through, you might call me Penelope." A small smile tugged at his lips. Penelope, then. That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner. Venison Zachary had hunted, vegetables from Penelope's garden, and a bottle of her father's prized whiskey. As they ate, Penelope noticed Zachary seemed distracted, his eyes frequently drifting to the window. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked suddenly. He set down his fork. "I should. The trouble's handled. You're safe now. Where will you go? There's work in Arizona." "Friend of mine needs help with a situation." Penelope nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Always another situation, another place. It's the life I know." "Is it the life you want?" Zachary didn't answer, and they finished their meal in silence. Afterward, he helped her clear the dishes, their hands occasionally brushing, each touch sending a current through Penelope that was becoming harder to ignore. As she washed the last plate, she felt his presence behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'll leave in the morning," he said softly. She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how little space separated them. "So soon? It's better that way." His voice was rough, his eyes dark with emotions he was clearly fighting. Better for whom? She took a step closer, emboldened by something in his gaze. "Not for me, Penelope." His hands came up to rest lightly on her shoulders. "I'm not the staying kind, never have been. You deserve more than that. Shouldn't I decide what I deserve?" Her chin tilted up defiantly. "What if I just want your company for a while longer? Is that too much to ask?" His fingers tightened slightly on her shoulders. "If I stay another day, I might not have the strength to leave at all." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Penelope's heart raced as she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar that ran along his jawline. "Then don't." When his lips finally met hers, it was with a gentleness that belied the intensity in his eyes. The kiss deepened as her arms wound around his neck, his hands sliding down to her waist to pull her closer. Years of loneliness seemed to melt away in the warmth of their embrace. Later, sitting on the porch swing beneath a canopy of stars, Penelope's head rested on Zachary's shoulder while his arm held her securely against his side. "I've never felt like I belonged anywhere," he admitted quietly. "Not since I was a boy, always moving, always watching my back. And now?" She asked, tilting her head to look up at him. He gazed out at the land stretching before them, silver in the moonlight. "Now I'm wondering what it might be like to stop running." "You could find out," she suggested carefully. "The ranch needs a strong hand. I could use a partner." "A business partner?" His eyes found hers, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Eventually, perhaps something more, if that's something you might want." His answer was another kiss, one that promised possibilities neither had dared imagine before. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and quiet joy. Together, they repaired fences, tended livestock, and carefully explored the silver vein that had nearly cost Penelope everything. They decided to develop it slowly, cautiously, using the profits to improve the ranch rather than drastically changing their lives. As autumn gave way to winter, the ranch house became truly warm again, filled with conversation and laughter. Zachary proved to be not just a skilled rancher, but a thoughtful companion whose quiet strength complemented Penelope's determination perfectly. On Christmas Eve, with snow dusting the mountains and a fire crackling in the hearth, Zachary presented Penelope with a small wooden box he had carved himself. "It's not much," he said as she opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "But it's a promise, if you'll have me." Tears filled her eyes as she looked from the ring to the man before her, no longer a drifter but a partner, a protector, and the love she hadn't known she was waiting for. "I'll have you," she whispered, "for as long as we both shall live." Their wedding was held in the spring, with wildflowers blanketing the hillsides and the entire town of Hillsborough turning out to celebrate. Sheriff Taylor stood as Zachary's best man, while Mr. Green from the assay office gave Penelope away. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch of blossoming apple trees that John Morrison had planted years earlier, Penelope felt her father's presence, his approval of the man who had not only saved his daughter's inheritance, but had given her the greatest gift of all, a future filled with love and possibility. Years later, the Morrison Caldwell Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the territory. The modest silver mine provided enough to expand their holdings and establish a small foundation to help widows and orphans in the region. Their 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, grew up strong and capable, learning the value of hard work and the importance of fighting for what's right. And on quiet evenings, Zachary and Penelope would still sit together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the land with gold, marveling at how a deed to a piece of earth had led them to discover the true meaning of home, not just a place, but a love worth claiming and protecting with all their hearts.